Some exciting news for our friends at the West Point Association of Graduates. AUSA, also known as the Association of the United States Army, is now an official association partner with WPAOG. This partnership gives West Point graduates automatic basic membership to the U.S. Army's Professional Association, bringing access to a wealth of new benefits. Through AUSA, West Point grads can tap into powerful professional networks, participate in exclusive events both nationally and locally, and access resources that support their career journey. This partnership showcases our shared commitment to supporting future Army leaders. Welcome to the WPAOG podcast. This week, we're honored to welcome General Robert B. Brown, a distinguished military leader with a remarkable 38-year career in the U.S. Army. From platoon leader to commanding general of the U.S. Army Pacific, General Brown has led at every level, including deployments to Haiti, Bosnia, and Iraq. A 1981 West Point graduate, he's held pivotal roles in the Pentagon, U.S. Army Europe, and the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Now serving as the president and CEO of the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, General Brown continues to shape the future of Army leadership and community. Join us as we explore his legacy of service and insights from a lifetime of command. Please enjoy this episode with guest host Ian Faison.
Welcome to the West Point AOG Broadcast Network. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios, here playing a little guest host to speak with the amazing General Robert B. Brown. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great. I don't know about that amazing, though. Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, amazing on the basketball court, I can tell you that much.
Well, you get better as you get older. There's no question. The stories get better and better, no doubt.
So speaking of that, what led you to West Point in the first place?
I always find it fascinating because, there's some folks, they knew they wanted to be in the military since they were a little kid or, different family tradition or whatever. But folks go to West Point and join the Army for all different reasons. So I was, as you mentioned, I was a pretty decent basketball player. I lived my last 3 years of high school in the state of Michigan. And there was a guy there, was a senior, same time as me, named Irvin Magic Johnson. You may have heard of him. And he was a pretty good player. I remember my father would be, how parents are with their kids, like, he's getting all the publicity, and I'm like, Dad, he's pretty good, and, but I was pretty good too. So anyway, Magic Johnson was going to Michigan State University. And so I did not want to go there. I wanted some playing time, but I got a full ride basketball scholarship to a place called University of Michigan. And that was going to be pretty good. My brother and sister had gone there. But then a guy named Coach Mike Krzyzewski, the head coach at West Point at the time, came by my house to recruit me to this place called West Point. I didn't even know what it was, to be quite honest. And my father was a Marine in the Korean War, and his eyes lit up. For some reason, he hated Annapolis. Thank goodness. But he loved West Point. And then Coach K was so persuasive. I said, okay, I'll go visit. And I fell in love with the idea of selfless service and just seeing. I remember there was a poster, it's probably still there today, but it had like Eisenhower, Patton, MacArthur, Bradley, and it said at West Point, much of the history we teach was made by those we taught. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. And, and just the idea of service and the team was so close. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. So I told Michigan no, and the whole coaching staff came to my house. And they're like, this is 1977, by the way. So they're like, you're going to be in the Army. Are you crazy? And I said, hey, I can serve my country. I'll have a job. I'll be proud of what I'm doing, and on and on. And so pretty much they left empty-handed, and I ended up at West Point and really was gonna get out and coach. I wasn't going to stay. I had no intention of staying in the Army, and ended up staying 38 years. So you never know, So yeah, that's how I ended up at West Point, and I'm really grateful to Coach K. It would have never happened without him, and Lane's close mentor and friend, and just so very fortunate. Yeah, so that's my story. Everybody's got a different one, but I think it's pretty cool to hear why you came in and how,
There's one of my favorite Coach K stories is he tells a story about when he was at West Point and playing for Coach Knight.
Yeah.
And they would always do this drill every day. And then he went to be an assistant coach for him. I think it might have been in Indiana. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was Indiana, University of Indiana.
And
the year they were undefeated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there was they had some great player on that team. And he was like, hey, coach, we used to do this drill every day at West Point for the point guards. Like we had to do this every single day. You don't even do that here. And he looked at Coach K and he's like, well, you're not that guy. He's like, you had to do the drill. He doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's it. He did those drills with us, by the way, later as head coach. And I broke my nose like 3 times, some of those Bobby Knight drills that Coach K took. And so, yeah, that's funny, though. I could see Bobby Knight. He was a real character. I could see him saying that to Coach K, no doubt about it. Yeah.
What was it like? I mean, early days of him being a coach, what was it like playing for him?
Oh, it was incredible. Now, I didn't realize at the time how much I was learning. I learned from him how to build a team, and I used it in every unit from platoon through Corps, or the largest Army Service Component Command, 126,000 in the Army. I used the principles I learned from Coach K about building a team. And, now he was tough on me. He was very tough. He would, to this day, he still gives me crap because I was an offense. I was a shooting guard. And, I wasn't crazy about defense, I'll be honest, And I used to hear, defensive players drive Volkswagens and offensive players Ferraris, and it's basketball, not defend ball, So anyway, so I wasn't great on defense. In fact, one time we're playing, it was Yale, and I hit a shot to win the game. And up in the locker room, and coach is coming up, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to say, great job, Bob, you won the game. No, he said, hey, how about playing some defense now, And I thought, geez, he could have at least said good shot, But today recently he introduced me at an event we were both speaking at, and he introduced me, and he goes, I get very nervous that Bob was responsible help with the defense of our nation because he never played any defense when he played for me. So, so he still gives me crap about that, but he was amazing, obviously amazing. At the time, what I have thought he was going to go on and become the winningest coach of all time. I mean, we knew he was great. We knew he was amazing. We love the guy, but, it's pretty incredible, and I don't know that we would have predicted that, but I can see why he was, because he's just an amazing leader and inspirational leader, and amazing person. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of, I think, interesting stuff there too, just in terms of sort of organizational dynamics. Like you're in a basketball coach, or really any sport, you have such a small amount of people. It's never more than a platoon, like ever, right?
Yeah,
I mean, even the biggest sports team is not going to be 40 people, right? So, you're managing such a small amount of people, and that's critical to leadership, right? You manage a small amount of people even if you're managing, like you said, 100,000 people, your core group of people that you're interacting on a day-to-day basis is still probably pretty small,
Yeah, he is the most amazing leader I've ever seen, and I've seen some amazing leaders in the military, in the Army, and elsewhere. He's the most amazing I've seen at understanding people and how to motivate individuals, and not only, how to build a team, about, the keys to building a team, but then also how to really motivate different individuals. Like when he was selected to coach the men's basketball Olympic team, and was all NBA superstars, and everybody said, oh, this college coach, how's he going to do that? There's no way. And I'm telling you, he did it brilliantly. In fact, his first meeting with the team, I was proud. He asked me to speak, and I brought in wounded warriors. And Scotty Smiley, 01 grad, had lost his eyes in a suicide bomber. He was in my Stryker brigade, an amazing human being and hero, Scotty, and several other wounded heroes. And we spoke about selfless service to these NBA players. And honestly, it changed my, I always thought, oh, these guys are all just big egos. But I'll tell you what, they listened and respected. They were all crying and supporting the wounded warriors. In fact, later when they would make a great play, they'd salute afterwards, and it was in honor of the wounded warriors. And so this was Coach K, instilling in them. He's telling them, hey, this is more than basketball. You're representing your country. And I know it's a tough parallel, combat and sports, okay, but the selfless service part, certainly you're representing your country, and you're proud of that. And in the Army, we represent our nation. And, and so it was amazing. He had them. He understood them, and of course, won 3 gold medals as the coach, and Didn't lose. I think they lost one preliminary game against Greece, which taught them a lot, but didn't lose any in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Just amazing. Yeah, and those guys would follow them anywhere. One of those superstars, I guarantee you.
And, speaking of selfless service, you flash forward to today. You're the president and CEO of AUSA. Can you share a little bit more about like that role and why you stepped in and wanted to do this?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for asking. Really proud. The Association of the United States Army has been the Army's premier association, formed by the Army 74 years ago, 1950. And the Army realized they needed someone to help educate both within the Army, educate, and then outside the Army, educate folks on the Army, educate. We're an educational nonprofit, so we do leadership development education. We educate the public on the Army's role. They needed someone to help connect the Army with America and connect the Army with industry. That's so important for the Army. We can't do anything without the professionals in industry to get us the best equipment in the world and technology in the world, and then to inform as well, and inform folks on why we have an Army, what the Army needs, et cetera. So I'm really proud. Every single day we're helping soldiers and families and making a huge difference for the Army. And it's mostly, we're again a nonprofit, but we have about 5,000 volunteers in 122 chapters across the United States, Europe, and the Pacific. Newest chapter in Guam, and we have chapters all over Europe as well, and the Pacific. We have them in Japan, Korea, and all over the United States. So there's about 5,000 volunteers in those chapters. And every single day they're helping active duty, National Guard, and Reserve soldiers and making a difference out there. And it's just a real honor to be able to be a part of the organization. And it's, unfortunately, people just don't hear enough about what the Army does in a critical role. We had an Army before we had a nation. And I would argue we wouldn't have a nation if we didn't have an Army in 1775, coming up on 250 years of the Army next year. 249 for our nation. And so that Army is just absolutely critical, and we're here to support them 110%. So I'm really proud to do that. And they select a retired four-star to do that since the beginning. Actually, the first president CEO was the vice chief of staff, the number 2 active duty in the Army. And then they realized, wait a minute, the lawyers got involved. So that probably needs to be a retired guy and not active duty. So they switched it. So and we have 1.7 million members, which is pretty awesome. One of the largest nonprofit in the military service organization, MSO, Veteran Service Organization. We're, if not the largest, certainly right up there is one of them. Yeah.
And if anyone listening, wants to support in any way or tap in or get involved, how could they do that?
AUSA.org. Go to AUSA.org and you'll see ways to get involved in a chapter. You can look up a chapter near you, AUSA chapter. There's probably one very close to where you're at unless you're in some real remote location, but we have them in Alaska and we have them, as I mentioned, Guam's pretty remote. We got them in Guam, all over the place. So also other ways, you can look at other ways to help and support, because it's just so important now. We tell the Army story so people know what the Army does, and we support a strong Army. Is what a crazy, challenging world we're in right now, with really aggressive, authoritarian regimes that are challenging the world order and the peace in the world, and want it to be swayed in their favor, not for all. So it's a challenging time, and I think the best way as I think it was George Washington said, to be prepared for war is the best way to ensure peace. So.
And zooming out, 38-year career, which, obviously you're still in the fight here. And, you faced a lot of different stuff over the years. Is there any significant challenge that stands out to you that you dealt with and overcame?
Yeah, I think, when you look at of course, you're challenged almost every day. There's challenges, and fortunately, the Army is the greatest team in the world, and you're with such talented people. And with really the thing is, being a graduate yourself, there's nothing like selfless service and the mission. And so that's phenomenal. But I'd say the most challenging thing by far was the loss, the first time and every time, loss of a soldier in combat that's in your command. It's different. Sadly and tragically, I lost soldiers in peacetime in a car accident, or, something happens and it's terrible. But there's nothing as unbelievably difficult as losing a soldier in combat. You've just ordered them to go do something to help in the defense of our nation. And when you lose a soldier, it's very difficult. And I always felt like from our day at West Point, for me in 1977 through 38 years, the Army did a wonderful job preparing me as a leader, incredible leader development, and prepared me for just about everything I could ever imagine. I don't think they prepared me enough for the loss of a soldier, but I don't think they could have. I mean, it's how do you train realistically as you can, but you just can. And I remember the first soldier, I was at the memorial in Iraq, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. The pain, it was just this pain. And I see, I'm with these bravest men and women I've ever served with, and we're, just hugging each other and crying like babies, and it's just a tough thing. And I think the thing that gets you through it is, before you deploy, you better be doing the best possible, toughest, most demanding training you possibly can. And my criteria was always to be able to look the parents in the eye and say, hey, I've done everything I can do for your son or daughter. And that doesn't make it any easier, but I think you can't live with yourself if you feel that way. And having a daughter who's a lieutenant colonel, deployed several times myself, I kind of expected that from the folks she worked for, that, hey, you trust and confidence that they've done all they can possibly do. And then you also have to establish a foundational support network before there's a loss and a crisis, and who you can go to and talk to. And because everybody, you're human beings, everybody needs that support when you're in a tough situation like that. So
yeah,
I think that's the most challenging. Yeah.
Do you sort of spoke about the importance of preparation and the Army preparing, and you sort of preparing yourself and preparing your family. One of the pieces there is about mentorship and finding mentors and finding other people, so you don't have to remake the same mistakes that others, have made.
Yeah.
How did you think about, mentorship and preparing your mind?
I don't think there's a successful leader in any field, the Army, business, sports, who doesn't have a mentor. I think mentorship is critical. And I think successful people, you realize that, as you mentioned, you can get a lifetime of lessons from this individual, and it has to be the right person. You can't be assigned a mentor. But I was very fortunate to have amazing leaders, starting with Coach K, but then, leaders like General George Casey was a major in my first unit, and watching him and, then being mentored by him, and later General Ron Griffith, who was just a Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, an amazing leader. I learned so much from him. And General Gordon Sullivan, he used to have the job I have now at AUSA and was former Chief of Staff of the Army. You need them to learn those experiences, to run things by them. And in those tough times, that's another support network to be able to get a hold of them. And they'll give you that wisdom that you need, to be able to handle the tough situations and what they did to work through it, and how you. So it's just key. And I would be very surprised in just about any field out there if someone said, well, I did it all on my own, I didn't have a mentor. That'd be the rare exception, I would say.
You mentioned the impact of, you had Coach K as this early coach, and you've, all these other mentors. How do you keep track of your leadership style, or building that over time, and your philosophy?
That's a great question. And, I think, certainly we do a great job preparing future leaders in the Army, whether it's a non-commissioned officer or an officer, through schools and courses they take and leadership courses. And you're starting to form it. And I think when you're a young leader, you're looking for that lead. Oftentimes you're looking for that famous leader that you're like, oh, hey, I'm kind of like Omar Bradley, or I'm kind of like Patton, whatever it is, you're sort of looking, and that's not really, and you're trying, but I think what you learn eventually is you have to be yourself, and you have to be genuine, and you have to be, no one does you better than you, right? And so you can't pretend to be someone else, but certainly that being yourself is built from those mentors and from the leadership lessons and the study of leadership and reading autobiography about great leaders, and you pick up a lot. I picked up the most from working for great leaders.
Yeah.
And one, for example, General Griffith, I mentioned humility. He was, I got to see him. He could talk to someone he just met on the side of the street, or a private, or the president, and he was the same leader and the same humble individual, humility with confidence, I would say, not a humility with confidence. And then you observe folks like I mentioned, General Casey and General Carter Ham was another mentor. And those guys that, they show you care, how much they care. They love their subordinates. They love, it becomes this incredible care that it builds a trust in an organization. And you see that. And so all those kind of, as you're capturing this and learning and you grow as a leader, you're constantly growing. I think if anybody that says, well, I've got leadership down 100% where I need to be, they probably need to stop leading and go do something else. Because you're always going to have strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And you're always going to try to, reinforce those strengths and improve those weaknesses. And so you're constantly learning. And I was very fortunate, as I said, to have great leaders I was able to work for that I learned from, and then multiple experiences, I think I was very fortunate 10 years in a row as a general in command from 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star level right in a row. I never had to go be, staff time in the Pentagon or anything like that. So I was very happy about that in command and loved being in command and continued to learn up to the last day, to try to improve as a leader.
Yeah. It's funny. I found obviously, West Point is so good at giving me all of the foundational levels of like leadership and obviously giving you all these different sort of like leadership experiences along the way, leading yourself and leading, one person and two people and, 5 and 10 and whatever. And when and then, in the military, you have sort of this, rank structure that sort of, lends to that. But there's also these sort of like organizational dynamics. I was a battalion S1 and brigade S1. And, you have to have influence and you have to support the commander and you have to support, all of those things. But in the civilian world, there's some of that, but it's so much more fluid, and people, that you have to connect to them, personally on a much different way, because the motivations that they have are often like extremely complex. Like in the military, like the motivations, like it's a little bit more black and white, like where you are, that you're, what your job is going to be. Whereas like in the civilian world, it's just, they could want to do this. They could want to change their careers. They could want to, there's like a million different things they could want to do.
Right.
Oh, they just had a baby. They just want to spend more time with their baby, or they don't want to do, so I've found that like having your teams, most of all, know that you actually care about them and that you understand them for who they are, rather than just like, the task that they're trying to do has been, a guiding light that I learned, from West Point.
Well, there's no doubt. I'll give you a story. You made a great point. West Point does an amazing job, as does ROTC and Officer Candidate School, of preparing our leaders, officers, and the NCO schools do a great job. But so I'm a plebe, beast barracks, and I think it's important, learn to be led. That you got to. And my first squad leader was very almost Patton style, arrogant. And I remember one time I did something wrong. I don't remember what it was. And he said, "Brown, you're making me look bad." And I'm thinking to myself, I don't give a shit if you look bad. I mean, I'm trying to survive here. I was struggling and I wasn't ready for all the military stuff. And I don't care if you look bad. Give me a break. So my next squad leader, second detail, you knew he cared and he motivated. He was an inspirational leader. And you didn't want to make him look bad. I'd feel terrible if I made him look bad. And it was the difference of one I knew really cared about me. The first guy probably cared, but he certainly didn't show it. And you didn't know it. And the second guy, I knew it for sure. And I took that lesson from plebe year, and you start, it matters. It's a simple thing like that. Everybody is, from the time we're born, we're evaluating those that lead us, our coaches, our teachers. And if you think back to the best leader you had when you were growing up, it's usually not the smartest person, the best looking, the whatever. It's the one you knew cared about you and the team instead of themselves, or making themselves. The minute you thought it was to make them look good, they weren't a good leader. You didn't care about them. But the ones that truly cared, they were the ones you respect the most. And so, it's a great point. And those complexities are there in civilian world and the military, I would argue. Although, in the military, a little more regimented what they're going to do, but they have all the same complications in life that you mentioned, all the,
Yeah.
not sure what job they're going to go to, not sure if they're going to stay or not, deploying children, all the things that come into life. And so, knowing them as people and really knowing them well and showing you care, that's essential. That's critical at every level.
Yeah. And the sort of the reason why I say it's a little bit more challenging in the civilian world is not to say that like it's, I think they're both extremely challenging. The thing about the civilian world, I think that's a little different is, with your soldiers, you can go do a barracks check.
Yeah.
You can go, like, you're going to have like an FRG or something like that, you're going to have a tether to their personal life.
You're with them more. You can find out more. Whereas, you're absolutely right. In the civilian sector, it's private. You're not going to dig into stuff that much. You don't know what's affecting them at home, maybe. Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you. Yeah.
And I think that, like, even as strong as you can have a mission for your organization and a purpose for your organization for being, I'm a CEO of a 20-ish person company. And I think that it's, you have people working all over the world. It's like remote. It's, this sort of different thing. But I think that what, digging into the point there of like knowing them and knowing what they're looking at and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish and what matters to them and all of that and showing that you care. And the other side of that is like a belief that they can be. One of the most challenging things for me in the civilian world is that you can have anyone on your team in the whole world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you could. I mean, you could try at least, right?
Right.
Whereas in the military, it's like you just got who you got. Right. It's like that's
true.
who was given. This is your squad, right? Like, those are your people. This is your platoon, whatever. And so the military, to me, what helped me a lot is I was really good at making people better and helping them to get better and training them and figuring out those sort of things. Whereas I got in the civilian world, I'm like, oh, I can make people, once we got them on the team, I can help them get better. But it's like, how the heck do I pick the people?
Yeah.
Which are the right people to get there?
Yeah, it's a great point. And mentorship is the most rewarding thing. We didn't talk that. I mean, it's much more rewarding to to really mentor and help develop someone and you see them succeed. That's a greater feeling than you'll ever have about anything you ever do yourself. It's an amazing feeling. And and it's critical. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
The other thing that I think I've found that's pretty challenging, and I'm curious, as in your transition, is the idea of like credit and like taking credit for things. In the military, I mean, there's so much about the team and about building the team. But in the civilian world, you also, like, part of it is you have to build your individual, your individuality, right? People jump from company to company and do all these sort of things. So you have to build yourself up too. And I just find that incredibly challenging to build yourself and, to show all the work that the team is doing. Because it's so tightly knit, but it's just, I think it's tough for military people to promote themselves at all in general.
I think, especially Army, it's just not our culture. It's one of the challenges that at AUSA we help out with is the Army is not great at telling their story. It's like in our cultures, do a tough mission and then go on to the next mission. Don't sit there and brag about it. Whereas, and I'm going to say, my dad was a Marine, so I can say this, Marines are great at telling their story because they've always been paranoid. They're small. And they've always been paranoid. And so they really ingrain in them, tell what you did. And you'll have, 50 Marines on a mission and 5,000 Army, and the Marines will get all the credit because they tell their story better. So we definitely have to get better at that. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's great. The humility is great and all that, but people need to know what you've done. And so but I still think the principle of give the credit and take the blame for the leader, give your subordinates the credit and you take the blame. I still think that works in the civilian world. Certainly not in every company. And I've had, when I was looking at what I wanted to do, and I was looking at some jobs that are like, well, for this job, you really got to promote yourself. It's got to be all about you. Get out there on social media. And I'm like, well, that's not the job for me. No, thank you. I kind of consider myself a humble leader. I want to be an inspirational leader. I don't want it to be about me, but it's out there. But I do think you can find companies that will recognize a leader that gives the subordinates the credit and takes the blame when things go poorly and do better. I think a lot of companies understand that's really powerful leadership and it works. But I agree with you, not all companies, that's for sure. Not all fields either, So
you talked a little bit about, sort of finding your own voice versus just sort of copying other people. I totally agree. And I have the same exact my beast was the same thing for me where, my first leader versus my second leader and all that stuff. It's so funny how that stuff works. Almost like it's by design.
Probably was. We didn't know it.
Exactly, right? Be way harder on the first group. But yeah, so I'm curious, like, as you think about, your time in the military and being an individual and like figuring out who, General Bob Brown was, or, before then, lieutenant and captain and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I found that the people who could maintain their individualism to make their own decisions, to be strategic and tactical and to think outside the box and do those things, that a lot of times those people were the people who rose in the ranks and were able to do that. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, right? So I'm just curious, like, were there any times in your military career where you pushed against the grain or you really wanted to do something that was not status quo?
Oh my goodness. How many times? No, sir, we don't have enough time. Seriously, I would say, I talk to groups about this a lot in leadership sessions. I'd say in 38 years, there were about 15 times I was almost relieved for trying to do the right thing and pushing back, trying to do the right thing when I knew it was the right thing. And in a few cases, it was something had gone wrong and I took the blame and, stand in front of the division. I was a battalion commander, stand in front of the division commander with a lawyer there and saying, hey, sir, don't fire Captain so-and-so. He made a mistake. It's my fault. Fire me if you're going to fire somebody. And, it seemed like a long period of silence, but then finally, hey, shut up, sit down, Bob, let's talk about this. And, I was able to save that young leader's job because, they weren't trying to do anything wrong. It's just, stuff happens every now and then and you're trying to do the right thing. So I think it's really important. You're absolutely right on, you get to a point as a leader, there's no question. And in all those situations, some, I thought, that's it, I'm done. And you need to look in the mirror and you got to live with yourself, and I promise you, I never thought in a million years I'd be a general, never did anything to be a general. And I used to, when I was commanding Combined Arms Center, Leavenworth and CGSCs in that span of control there. And we would talk to the new Command General Staff College classes, and it was always the spouses, not the majors, but the spouses would come up. I was a 3-star at the time, and my wife and I would be there, and they'd come up and say, what does it take to be a general? And I said, well, if your husband or wife is trying to be a general, they won't be one. Yep. Because, you've got to do what's right for the soldier, what's right for the unit, the Army. If you're thinking of, and I knew many leaders that might have been pretty good as, like, say, a battalion commander, pretty good leader. Then he became a brigade commander and said, oh, wow, I'm in a small number now, I might be a general. And they make decisions based on become a general, though they didn't become a general, they failed. You can't do that. And I never did that, I assure you. And, but I did, in those tough decisions, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, look, I got to know that I've done the best I can for the unit, the Army. And I don't want to, if it takes, doing less than that, or, I don't want to be a general, so I did not think at all. And I had some interesting, like, I was the 2nd Stryker Brigade commander in the Army, but I did the test and evaluation of the whole Stryker concept and had Strykers before the 1st Brigade had them so that we could test it and so forth. And we also tested the modular brigade concept and got to do National Training Center and Joint Readiness Training Center, both in command. But in going through all that, we had to be very candid about a whole bunch of stuff. Wasn't working, some that, folks didn't want to hear. You had to let them know. And then some that was working great, you needed to reinforce. And I thought I made so many people mad in that process. There's no way I'm going to be a general. And I was fortunate to command almost for 4 years that brigade because I got extended and took them to Iraq. And it was an amazing unit. I'm really proud. It's just incredible. And 125 Stryker Brigade Combat Team. But there were many times that if I'd have bent and looked at, I got to do this to become a general, I wouldn't have done the right thing. And so that can't be part of the equation. Yes, there are plenty of times you go against the grain. And I would also tell you that when I became a general, I respected individuals that worked for me that did that would tell me. It wouldn't just be a yes man or woman. They're going to tell you what they really think and what they really feel. That's really important. It's key. That building that trust and that candor, it's the foundation of any team in any field. Again, I would argue.
It's funny. So I think I was going through, Bullock and all that stuff right after, I think I left, right after you took command of the Maneuver Center of
2010,
Excellence.
I took the Maneuver Center. Yep. And brought armor down from Fort Knox. Exactly. Yeah. I came in 2010. Yep.
That was I remember I was a lieutenant at the time, and a bunch of my buddies, infantry guys. It was a huge deal. There was a lot of, that could not have been a super popular decision,
it was a challenge. And it was funny because I was told I was going to command a division, which of course every leader wants to go command a division. It was like awesome. But I was later told, well, we needed a team builder to bring armor down. And so we went again. And the other thing was in Iraq with my Stryker Brigade, when we got to Mosul in northern Iraq, it was a mess. And so we were beefed up from 5,000 we were supposed to be. I had 12,000 soldiers, a whole bunch of extra battalions from 82nd, 25th, aviation, et cetera. And so we were at 12,000 for 10 months. So they sort of told me, hey, you've already done the division type thing. We need you to bring armor down and form a team and maneuver center. And that was a incredible, wonderful assignment and amazing experience. And I had, leaders, Walt Pyatt and Tom James were both brigadier generals, the armor commandant and the infantry commandant. And instead of it being friction with each other when armor came, they learned from each other and both got better.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. Both got better from learning from each other and forming that amazing team, the maneuver center. And it was amazing when you think about it. We would send lieutenants, infantry lieutenant perhaps would go right into combat, never even having seen a tank.
Yep.
Or a tanker, never having seen infantry and worked with them. They might get to the unit and go right to combat, But with the maneuver center, of course, they worked together and both got better. It was really a rewarding experience.
Yeah, I think that, part of, Army not telling his story, the Army not telling their story sort of well enough, which I think is so true. I think there's so many things about the Army. My dad was a private in the Army, back in the late 50s. And, we'd have so many jokes where the Army hasn't changed from when, from when he was there to I was there, he was
hurry up and wait. That hasn't changed, stand in line, exactly.
He was standing guard on the Berlin Wall and, I'm standing guard in, Kandahar or whatever. But anywho, but there's so many things that change. And I think the Army really, to use the sort of the tech terms, disrupts itself so often. There's so many sacred cows that really get pulled down. And the maneuver center, that's a great example of that, where people were really mad. I forget, when the stuff with the berets back in the day, which is a huge deal. But all these things, and I'm just curious, how do you sort of balance the culture and the history of decisions versus doing what you think is right for, the future of the organization or the country?
Yeah, that's another great question, because change is very challenging. Everybody says they want change. They really don't. Human beings like consistency. They want somebody else to change, not themselves. So, and the way I describe when you're leading change, there'll be a small group of people you'll have, maybe a handful, that really understand the change, what's the right thing to do. Then there'll be a bunch of people on the fence, kind of sort of understand, but sort of don't. Then there are a ton of people on the other side of that fence saying, what the hell do you want to change for? You don't know what you're doing. Why would you change? And it might be they're afraid of losing their job. It might be they just don't understand the change and the need for change. And so as you start to change and you see success, you've got to reinforce every little success. And that drops people off that fence and then other people up on the fence. And successful change, by the end, everybody's on your side of the fence. It's changed and nobody remembers who led the change. They all are taking credit for it. And that's successful change. And it's hard. And I was involved in that, oh my gosh, I can't tell you, dozens and dozens of times in the Army. Well, I mentioned a Stryker Brigade, that was change. Modularity was change. A brigade I had more than a division had in capabilities. That was change. It was unbelievable. But, getting to the maneuver center at Benning, we put the emphasis on the squad. Squad is a decisive formation, and nobody had really worked on the squad. I would show this Restrepo, so it shows Afghanistan with a young West Point grad company commander who was in my Stryker Brigade, and he would be on a handheld mic with a map trying to figure out where he was and stuff, and then I'd show a clip from Band of Brothers in World War II in the exact same situation. I said, so this is how far we've come. We've done nothing for the squad. It's like accepting, a black and white TV today or a corded phone, for God's sakes. I mean,
Yep.
we've got to move it forward. And that got the squad stuff moving. And now it's one of the priorities, soldier lethality. And we've done a ton for the squad. So it was change, and it was fighting. Oftentimes when you're changing, you're fighting the tradition, you're fighting the people that don't really want to change, and you just got to work it extremely hard. You have to have a strategy. How are you going to get there? What's the vision? You have to be passionate about it. You have to build champions of that and work it. And when it's the right thing to do, it's very difficult. And it takes a ton of effort, a ton of energy. But I will tell you, it is worth it when you succeed. And the Army must have it. They must have leaders that are willing to go out and make change where it's needed at the strategic level for certain. And it's the toughest because it's always the toughest problems.
Yeah, I remember the class of West Point. I mean, I remember sitting there and us talking about survivor's bias and talking about how, the people who got to the place where they are going to be the most resistant of change. I was like, well, it worked for me. I'm here.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
Exactly.
This is how I learned things. This is how I got to where I am. So how could it possibly be that is wrong? Because then it means that I'm wrong, which is a hard thing to deal with.
No doubt. And sometimes it comes and you have no choice. I mean, it's so overwhelmingly obvious. Other times it might be a judgment call, and it's not as obvious. That's when it's more difficult. But I'll give you another example of when I was taking over U.S. Army in the Pacific. China has gotten more aggressive than ever before in history, and it's unbelievable. They have a strategy, and it's right out there and published. And by 2027, they want to take Taiwan back. They want to become the greatest military in the world by 2037. By 2047, the greatest nation, and they are dumping tons into defense, and then being incredibly aggressive in South China Sea and all over the world. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so it's an unbelievable situation. And they, of course, have spent a lot of money on this. If you look at charts, pushing back, they studied us in air-land battle when we were successful and, over the years, and they looked at what the U.S. does so well. And then they developed a strategy to stop it, anti-access aerial denial. Well, the good news is we're not doing that anymore. As the next air-land battle is multi-domain operations. It's the future. And I got to the Pacific and had the conversation with the Indo-Pacific commander that, hey, we can't win with the old strategy. China has developed, you can't get within 3,000 miles of the coast of China with air or maritime assets because they can kill you with a missile, and they're anti-access systems. And but multi-domain, where you have, continuous and rapid integration of Army joint coalition capabilities across all domains, land, air, sea, cyber, and space is the future. And we're seeing it play out in Ukraine in the terrible, Russia's aggressive, illegal, operations in Ukraine. But we're seeing it play out this and again around the world. This, it is the future. And so we had to get in there and develop all new ways to think and fight in order to be successful. And I'm pretty proud we did that in the Pacific, and it led to change. And the key, implementing multi-domain operations, and mainly through a thing called the Multi-Domain Task Force, which is a game changer. And land plays a key role because land is the most survivable of all terrain. And land does enable you, when you work together and you leverage convergence and present multiple dilemmas to an enemy, you can stop adversaries that would do you harm. And so, you were talking change, and it is difficult, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary if we're going to continue to be able to defend our nation and our way of life and the world order, if you will, the rules-based international order. That's a lot, isn't it? Holy smokes.
It is, but I could listen to you talk for the next 5 hours. I don't necessarily like to ask about legacy per se, because you're still writing your legacy, every day, and you will continue for decades. So, but just as a moment in time, as sort of a snapshot in time with where you're at right now, How do you see sort of, your legacy, from your time in that 38 career in the military and then what you want to do, going forward?
Well, yeah, I don't spend much time thinking about legacy
Yeah.
either, honestly, but I am proud that I was, I think I was called coach in every team I led, and they were amazing teams. And I'm proud of those teams we formed that did incredible things, both in combat and in peacetime. And so to be a member of those teams, I think I'm incredibly proud of that. I was an individual who's a general now who worked for me as a young captain and then later as a major. He recently introduced me, described me in a way that was the most flattering, that I'm grateful for. He said I was a modern day Fox Connor. And I thought, oh my God, first of all, I'm not sure. But, I did pride myself in mentoring a lot of individuals. I loved mentorship and developing leaders. And there's a whole bunch of generals running around, a whole bunch of sergeants majors. And I think I'm most proud of that. And just even being in the same sentence as a Fox Connor who mentored and developed Patton, Eisenhower, Bradley, it's like, holy smokes. I don't know about that, but I'm very proud of that. And I find great, reward in that, seeing them do so well and what it does for our Army and our nation. And I think going forward, it's the same thing. I'm all about how do you develop others? And there's such amazing young men and women out there selflessly serving, and to be able to help them in a little bit is the most rewarding thing for me, and by far, and to see it, the difference it will make. And you don't often see it right away. Sometimes it takes years, but it's incredibly rewarding. I think that's the thing I really enjoy the most. And again, building those trusted teams of professionals, that thrive in ambiguity and chaos. That kind of became what the Army was looking at doing. I helped develop that. And so, I've got more work to do, and I'm excited. But definitely that'll be the focus. How do you leave that to those folks better than before?
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. For listeners, go to ausa.org, ausa.org. Check it out. Find your local chapter. General Brown, any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Well, we're partnered with the Association of Graduates, which is great. And so it's powerful that if you're a member of Association of Graduates, you're automatically a member of AUSA, which is really cool. And you can help in both. You can help the wonderful West Point, an amazing institution that it is, which helps our Army. And then you can help our Army. And so working together, we're really proud to be partnered with AOG. And of course, wonderful. What West Point does for our nation is incredible. And leaders in and out of the military, obviously. And so we're really proud of that. So thanks very much, Ian. I really appreciate it. And thanks for what you're doing to help spread the word and these lessons out there. And really appreciate it. And I just say, go Army. Let's keep this great season going and beat Navy.
Beat Navy.
Cool.
That's
All
right.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the WPAOG Broadcast Network. Please take a moment to rate and review the show and join us each week for a new episode. Thank you for listening.